Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Horan. Today in studio, we have Dr. Joel Garcia. He's a doctor of cardiology at Village Heart and Vein Center. So welcome, Dr. Garcia.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. So I've heard a lot about you, and I'm excited to know, first of all, you are a doctor of cardiology.
Well, a medical doctor with a specialty in cardiology.
Okay, yes. So just to give us a little bit of background, give us an example of, how you got into medicine, where you went to school, and how that inspiration happened when you were younger.
So my journey to becoming a doctor is going to be a lot different than most people. My whole life as a young scholastic student in high school, I wanted to be an architect. I could draw well. I liked the design concepts. So I went to Penn State University for architecture. But I found out I liked drawing, but the major wasn't what I thought the profession would be like. And I didn't feel I would ever be a great architect. And I again, not being a quitter, I continued to persevere through the first 2 years. Between the second and third year, you have to make a commitment that's binding. And I just didn't feel that it was the right thing for me, but I didn't know what I was going to do. To make a long story short, I volunteered at a hospital between my sophomore and junior year to get some community service. I spent 0 seconds thinking to become a doctor in high school. And I got there, and they mistakenly put me in this pre-med shadowing program. And I tried to tell them, I don't want to do that. I'll carry charts and wheel patients around, but that's not my interest. They didn't listen. The month before I went there, they had a student named Joe from University of Penn. I'm Joel from Penn State.
Okay.
So I ended up going to the ER, and I met this ER doctor from California. He was doing locums, and he put me to work. He said, get out of that jacket and tie, and you're going to get it dirty. Next 3 months, I was doing things I probably should be in jail for, setting knees, taking injections, and getting the real trenches of medicine, and I fell in love. And even after those 3 months, I still wasn't sure, is this the right thing for me? And he told me, if you don't do this, you'll regret it. So I went home that night, told my parents, who probably the only parents ever to cry that their son wants to be a doctor. And I'm leaving architecture and going into pre-med. And then for the next years, I studied like my life depended on it. And I knew this, I either going to make it or die trying. So there was no second option.
So you got your you got your undergrad in pre-med.
Well, psychology and pre-med, because a lot of those architecture classes don't transfer anywhere. So I had to find a good major that would handle those. And I went basically finished with a bachelor's of arts in psychology with pre-med track. And then I continued on schooling at Penn State, and eventually finished my undergraduate and graduate training, and went on to continue at Penn State in the residency program at Lehigh Valley Hospital in Allentown, PA, and then Hershey Medical Center for my fellowship. And that's another thing. I didn't think I'd want to be a cardiologist. I was in my internal medicine residency, and I didn't like being in clinic, but I liked being in the procedures and taking care of the sicker patients. My program director called me one day and goes, you're going to be a lousy primary doctor, but I think you need to go into cardiology. And I remember as a med student thinking, who would ever go in that profession? You have to come in all the time at night. But I found out that was my passion, and nothing else was going to make me happy. And it was the best decision I ever made.
So talk about the specifics of why, is it, you're helping people more? Is it that life and death situation?
Good question, Gina. I really enjoy, seeing a patient from the whole spectrum. I love the outpatient continuity, but you can do things, lives get saved. Every doctor has their niche and helps patients, but I like the cardiovascular system, doing procedures, handling cases of high intensity and risk. That just drove me, and never thought that would be me until I was in it and realized I love this. So for me, I work hard and I love what I do. When you love what you do, it's not a job. So I've heard a lot of doctors in medicine complaining about insurances and litigation and all these things, but because of where I came from and how I became a doctor, I feel blessed to do what I do, to be compensated highly. Most importantly, I make important impacts on people's lives.
So with the Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, that must really help not only for bedside manner, but also with the families, because it's not just the patient, and oftentimes the family are the ones that really are hit hard with diagnosis. Is that right?
Absolutely. It can be like post-traumatic stress for them, the spouses, the children. And I remember this time, very distinctly. I was an intern, one of the worst nights of my career in the ICU. And I'm writing a book about this, so eventually those stories will be out. So my book is about myself at 50 telling my younger self at 28 what to expect and to never give up. And there would be a lot of things in life that would be hard, but I would make it. And I tell that story through chapters and sentinel events in my life that involve patients, and every patient will tell a story. So that's part of my book. But to answer your question, absolutely, I think that's helped me understand the trauma with heart disease, how it affects so many people, and the acuity. Somebody's grandfather or father could be fine on a Saturday and fighting for their lives Sunday morning. And I can have an impact. So for me, being able to talk to the family and understanding it's not just the patient, but everyone around the patient has helped me in my practice of medicine and cardiology.
So let's get to the point before all that trauma happens. You're now at Village Heart and Vein, and talk about some of the early signs of heart disease that everyday people should be aware of.
Great question, Gina. One of the things I want to really push forward in this podcast is you see the usual picture of a man clutching his chest and like he's outside in the cold, like he's having a heart attack, and that's such a fallacy. Too often, patients don't have the classic textbook symptoms. Example symptoms such as fatigue, poor sleeping, breathlessness. Even people attribute anxiety or depression. It can be all cardiac related. My most important point I want to make is have a good relationship with your doctor where you feel you can go to someone to talk about these things. Often patients, I don't want to bother the doctor with this or that, when that may be the difference between saving their lives and not. So symptoms, to circle back to your question, symptoms, shortness of breath, lightheadedness, dizziness, heart palpitations, all those things could be potential symptoms and signs of early heart disease. And obviously important to have that relationship with your primary care physician who can get you to the right specialist.
Now, and also I would imagine that entails a lot of education. And since these days we do have access to information more than we did before, and I've heard that you were a teacher, did you ever re-instructor? So how could you talk to people about gathering the right information and using it to their advantage in conjunction with their doctor?
Another great question, Gina. I think you have to go on the internet. There's so many different varied sites. You want to go to trusted name brands. For instance, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Harvard Medical School. Those brand names are going to have peer-reviewed journal articles and not supposition about someone trying to potentially push, FDA non-regulated drug. Those sites will deal in evidence-based medicine, which is what we really need to treat someone and move forward. So that's how I would kind of summarize this. Go to websites that have brand name and that have credibility.
So we live in Florida, and it is sometimes too hot outside, but it is nicer weather, so we can get outside and play golf or take even just a walk. How does exercise help heart health?
Despite everything we have, if you think about bypass surgery, stents, there's so many different things. The number one thing someone can do is exercise, mental and physical. And mental's 50% of this equation. The endorphins you get from exercise bring positive hormones in your brain, endorphins that give you good positive energy. And we're not talking about having to go to the gym for 2 hours and bench 300 pounds. I'm talking about 30 minutes a day, 150 minutes a week of brisk walking, where you're able to hold a conversation, but it's a little taxing. Something as simple as that can lower blood pressure to the point where your stroke risk can be reduced by 50%. If you have a blood pressure of 140 over 90 and you cut it to 120 over 70, your chance of a stroke have diminished by 50%. Think about the power to do that without drugs or without other things. Lifestyle is always the base of any preventive and treatment plan.
All right, well, that sounds like a really good place to take a quick break. We will be right back with Dr. Joel Garcia. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Joel Garcia, and we're talking about heart health and prevention, which is super important. So, what about dietary changes we can make, or any embellishments, or not take away, put forth? How's that all?
Excellent question, and I think it's really important. We truly are what we eat. Now, one thing you have to understand, moderation is important. I think a lot of people hear heart-healthy diet. What does that mean? So I'll tell you what that means. That means having a diet that's really, really filled with fruits and vegetables, good fats like avocado, lean meats, lean poultry, fish, and then limited amounts of high fatty foods like salmon or steak. It doesn't mean you can't have those. I think a lot of people think, I can't have a steak because I'm eating heart healthy. It's not the case at all. You can have a steak once a month as long as the rest of your days are with heart healthy foods, salads with chicken, nuts, and almonds for a snack instead of candy out of the candy jar or machine. Water instead of fruit juices. If you don't like drinking water, put a little lemon in it. 64 ounces of fluid is absolutely essential. And I used to think I was doing that. I checked myself and I was drinking 30. It wasn't even close. Anytime you drink caffeine or alcohol, those are diuretics. You have to replace those. So water intake at 64 ounces a day, and then a diet really rich in greens, vegetables, and essential fats would be the primary kind of way to balance your diet. Looking up Mediterranean diet. That's the only diet, despite all these things we have. You've heard about the Atkins diet and intermittent fasting, all these things. The Mediterranean diet is the only diet that has actual evidence behind reduced morbidity and mortality. And you can easily look that up on the American Heart Association website and any entry in the Google search engine to get the components and to get a more in-depth reading about it.
Right. So fish, olive oil, citrus, lemons, and then grains, of course,
Absolutely.
from the Mediterranean. And then when you talk about, that was really interesting that you said liquid doesn't necessarily mean water.
Correct. Well, so, I want to drink fluids. Now, water is the best, and but some people just don't like water. They can't drink it for a number of reasons. And I'm one of those. I don't like water like I should. I've learned to like it. I just put lemon in it. At the very least, if I know I haven't drank enough water, I'll put a little bit of Crystal Light. Probably not the best decision, but it's at least fluid. Your kidneys are getting perfused. A lot of people complain about feeling bloated. The best treatment for that is water, to flush that out. People have peripheral edema in their legs. The best treatment is more water and exercise, not medicines necessarily. So water is the basis for your building block, and then peppering it with the diet we talked about. And again, if you want a dessert, you're out to dinner with friends, you can have one. It's just one. But unfortunately, our Western civilization diet, it's not one, it's three.
Right.
It's not one drink of alcohol, it's 3 or 4.
Right. And we love processed foods.
We do.
Let's face it. I always try to shop in the outer aisles of the grocery store because it's, your meat, your dairy, a little dairy, and your veggies, and then try to avoid all the pretty boxes, on the inside.
Yeah, it's clearly easy to do that. One kind of recommendation I have is never go shopping when you're hungry. You will just not make good decisions. And exactly what you said, Gina, shop on the periphery and then go in the aisles for specific things, but go with a list and intention. And nowadays with so many apps, you can have a grocery list printed out for you and kind of not get swayed by, certainly foods and that we love. The candies and sweets that we know aren't good for us, but we take them anyway. You can have some of those, but very minimal amounts. It just has to be discipline, and that can be done by anybody. They don't think they can, but they can.
So we've talked about prevention for everyday, folks, but some people do have genetic issues. And so if there is a family history of cardiovascular problems and challenges, what happens then?
So I will tell people this. There are a lot of patients I see will say, well, my genetics are terrible. My father died at 58 and my brother had it bypass at a certain age. I tell people, while genetics are important, lifestyle can combat genetics. I tell people that. I'll give you an example. I had a patient, he had 3 vessel bypass and he had 3 sons, bad genetics, but they were all elite athletes. 2 were triathletes, 1 was a marathon runner. And they had plaque burden. They saw me early in life and they had disease burden that does not look like you would think. Another thing I'm going to bring up is that old axiom of never judge a book by its cover. You see someone thin and athletic does not necessarily mean the inside is healthy. So to answer your question, Gina, it's if you have risk, that's the important, is to get to see your doctor before an event happens. I don't want to meet a patient at 2 a.m. who's suffering from a heart attack and dying of cardiogenic shock. It's in the office where we talk about screening with laboratory studies and cholesterol checks and blood sugar checks and blood pressure checks, showing them how to measure their blood pressure, showing them what it means, and getting out ahead before their genetics, which they don't have a control over, but they can combat with lifestyle. I'd much rather have a lifestyle that fights genetics than have no lifestyle and just bank on having good genetics. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And did you say plaque buildup?
Yeah.
Without even, and you eat well and you
Absolutely. That's a big thing with genetics. You can have patients who look the part. So back to the story of those 3 patients I had, they had plaque burden scores. It's called a calcium CT. It's a scan I recommend everybody at least age 50 and above. It's a screening test. Have you ever heard Uncle Joe passed on? We don't even know why. He was healthy.
Yeah.
They've had a ton amount of plaque that wasn't noted. Cholesterol numbers can fool us. They sometimes look normal, but it's not normal inside. A calcium CT is a very low radiation, no contrast CT we can do. It costs about $100 and will give you a plaque score. And that will tell you can be completely healthy and you get one and it's, for instance, 300. That's considered a moderately high score. You can be treated then before an event happens. The technology that's available now allows people to get out ahead of a potential event that could happen.
So then let's talk about that one little devil in the corner, stress.
Mm-hmm.
Stress is everywhere, like sleep, stress, going, just tightening up just because life these days, it seems like it's crazier than before, but I think it's always been crazy. What do you
It is. So we can't measure stress. I wish I could. But if you talk to patients who have events, cardiovascular events of stroke or heart attack, stress is in their lives. The way stress harms us is there's of the neuroreceptors, dopamine and norepinephrine, more epinephrine and norepinephrine. Those are harmful in high amounts. That's that fight or flight response we have. Do you ever notice when heart attacks occur, they happen at night or early morning, or strokes, because our cortisol levels are much higher. Cortisol is a stress hormone. If you don't sleep well, you're obese. Those are prime reasons that your cortisol levels are high. That raises blood pressure, that increases inflammation. Inflammation causes plaque rupture in the heart. All that leads to very deleterious effects on the cardiovascular system. And that's all just stress. We can't measure it, so what to do is prevent it. How you prevent it? 8 hours of sleep at best. Not eating a large meal before bed, 30 minutes of exercise a day, limiting alcohol for men, at most 2 drinks in the night, and women 1 drink. Anything after that becomes cardiotoxic. Drinking plenty of fluids and having a good support system where you have friends and family. Loneliness, which includes depression. A lot of my patients who have spouses that maybe passed on, I encourage them to get into clubs where they're around other people. I love the villages because the villages, I will say this, patients are healthier in the villages than where I practice in Orlando who were 20 years younger. The reason why? Companionship. There's so much to do with activity, playing golf, exercise. It's amazing. When I came here from Orlando, people said, "Are you really want to go to the villages? It's just old people." They couldn't be more wrong. I've never been happier in medicine, and I've been 18 years, than I am now because patients are engaged. I can help someone if they're engaged. And this community in the villages, they're a pleasure to take care of because of the lifestyle and environment that's there.
Well, we always kind of, poo-poo the villages, right? But I can't drive down the highway or go anywhere without seeing Tai Chi or golf or dancing classes. And I think there's somewhere around 400 or so social clubs. And you're saying that can really assuage any worries about cardiovascular disease caused by depression, loneliness,
Yes.
anxiety?
Absolute, very paramount. That it's a comprehensive program. Sometimes patients, I just don't want to be on medications. When I see a patient, medications I use only as necessary. A big concern of mine is polypharmacy. I can't finish 7 days of an antibiotic. When I have patients on 23 medications, the first thing I do is pare things down as much as I can. But I want them to know lifestyle, your diet, what you drink, your habits, no smoking, keeping your blood sugar under control. That's far more important and more powerful than meds. Meds are they're an important contribution, but they're not the baseline. The lifestyle and education like this we're talking about is what I want to really prove to patients. When I was in my fellowship at Penn State, I remember, this was in 2003 to 2006, I remember someone who passed on in their 70s, we used to say, oh, okay, he was older. Now, if a patient of mine dies less than 85, I want an autopsy. I don't understand why. The whole shift has changed. I had a 91-year-old who insisted on doing his stress test. I had to have him stop at 10 minutes because he was just going to do endurance. And someone asked me, why are you stressing him? He's 91. He's 91, but he's in better shape than most 60-year-olds. It's just a number. Age is just a number.
Well, he probably took your advice. Who knows?
I hope.
All right, well, that's another time to take a break. And when we come back, a little bit more with Dr. Joel Garcia. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, everyone. We're here with Dr. Joel Garcia of Village Heart and Vein Center. Now, Dr. Garcia, I'd love to talk about some common misconceptions about heart disease, because there's probably a lot of information out there that is nefarious or good or bad, or talk to us about that.
One of the biggest things I want to hit home on, and it's personal to me, my mother, for 2 years, and had fatigue and breathlessness. Every time she would go to her doctor, we'd ask about chest pain. She never had it. He never pressed it. It was only when she was having shortness of breath in an airport one time, she called me, was very stressed. I'm like, you need to go to the doctor and insist, tell them what's going on. Misconception is that chest pain is the hallmark symptom. It's not. Women, for years, have you ever heard of, Go Red for Women? And the reason is women were having higher rates of heart attacks and strokes than men, and we didn't understand why. It turned out we were part of the problem. We were blowing off it's just anxiety. Women typically work their work and then they handle the family. They never get time off. When a man's sick, I had the man flu 2 weeks ago. My wife took care of me. When she's sick, she has to take care of our 3 kids still and run the house. It's just, not saying it's fair, but women traditionally were getting pushed to the back. They were having events and doing worse because of that. So the point is, the conceptions that the symptoms are much different in women than men. Women will have more symptoms of fatigue, scapular discomfort, not necessarily chest pain, breathlessness, dizziness, depression, where men will have more likely exertional chest pain or discomfort, jaw pain, left arm discomfort, more of the classic symptoms. So the misconceptions, I want people to understand that every patient is individual, and not to just try to stamp someone that's not a heart problem because they don't have chest pain. My mom was a perfect example. For 2 years, she went untreated until they finally delved further at my assistance, and she ended up having 2 cardiac stents. So that was very personal to me. So when I treat patients, I'm very big on, you need to have a relationship with them where you can tell me anything that's going on, because a lot of times there's things going on that they don't want to tell you. Marital discord, children, finance, all that is part of their makeup when they come to me. They're not a heart when they come see me. My practice philosophy and our philosophy at Village Heart and Vein is we treat the whole person, not just the heart. And that's how you can give the best care and kind of get past misconceptions, and stereotypes of who might have disease and who might not.
So you said the inside and outside, but also, of course, the mental state and all that, the love goes to everything.
It does. And Gina, mental state, I'm big on this, is it gets so often put to the back burner. It's so important. People's hope, people's fears, anxiety. Anxiety can manifest itself in cardiac symptoms. There's many patients I see that don't necessarily have heart issues, but they need someone to listen to them and validate what they're feeling. The worst thing you can do as a provider is tell someone it's in your head. It's not in their head. They're feeling it. It's my job to tell them whether it's pathological or not. So many physicians and providers don't do that. It's a disgrace. And my profession needs to get better at that.
Well, just to piggyback on that, I mean, for example, I'm just like, I hate going to the doctor, and I'm always like, oh, I don't need it, And so when a person like me finally decides to go, because, and then the doctor, no offense, is just kind of brushing them off, you're never going to see that person again. There's a lot of people I'm sure that you see that are in there every day or every week. I'm not one of them. So how would you, let's talk about your relationship with your patients.
So I want to give this just a 2-minute spiel, if I may.
Yeah, let's do it, because I need help.
It's very important for patients to leverage their doctor. I want to explain to patients, you're paying me to help you. I better do that job. If you go and buy some product and it's defective, you're going to return it. But for some reason, there's still this, I don't want to bother the doctor. I don't want to do this. No, you're paying me to help you. So my time should be on you. I should not be on my phone. I should not be in a computer. One of the most important things, the way I sit down, when I taught at the UCF School of Medicine, I told my residents and students, you have about 30 seconds to a minute at most to engage with the patient. Sit down, don't put your hand in the computer, look at them. Do not stand at the door like you're burdened, and open with non-medical stuff. Put the patient at ease. The patients need to leverage their doctor relationship by coming in, being prepared with questions. I love when patients have questions, because then they leave my visit feeling they got their money's worth and time worth. So many times patients leave, I forgot to ask them that. I tell patients, please come with questions. It's a pleasure for me to talk to them, because they're engaged. When someone comes to see me, I want them to have all their medications. If they don't want to bring the bottles, take pictures of the bottles. And someone tells me they're on the blue pill and the red pill, that can't help them there. I need them to be just as engaged as I am. I have patients bring their blood pressure cuff. I want to make sure you're measuring it the correct way. Let me show you how. That's just taken for granted that they know. They don't necessarily. Research your doctor. We order a new pizza place. We look on Yelp. What are they saying?
Right.
Go research your doctor. There's plenty of sites there that are valid that will tell you what do people say. I can tell you this, and my manager, Lori McElroy, can also, you can't doctor those reviews. I mean, you can't say, get rid of all the bad ones, and it's on there.
Yeah.
So you take the good with the bad, but if you start seeing reviews all saying the same thing differently, that's valid. Those are important. Take that into consideration. Certainly you want to look up your doctor's credentials, but don't ever go see a doctor just based on they went to Harvard Medical School. Great school. But, you want a doctor you can trust, you feel that you can tell anything to, and they're in your corner. I'll tell you one last thing. When I was doing a rotation in medical school, I was in ophthalmology, and it was the worst rotation ever. I'm like, I did not want to do this. And the guy told me, so I want you to do one thing. In your career, when the patient comes to see you, even if you give them the worst news, they leave feeling better because they know you cared and they're not alone. And I've used that to be my practice philosophy is you come to see me, you're going to leave happier because I'm engaged. I'm there with you and you're not alone. Even if you have to have bypass, I'm going to get you through a heart transplant, you're not alone.
Well, that makes me feel better. And you can imagine that most people, it's if you go to the mechanic, right? And the mechanic knows everything about your car and you don't know a thing. So it can be a little intimidating because you're like, well, where does the doohickey go? Mm-hmm. So imagine that you're going to a doctor and, you're so intimidated and you're afraid to ask questions. So I do appreciate that, especially because I'm not probably one in a million that comes in with a list and all of my stuff and information. So you're telling me that that's okay to do.
Absolutely. And if you have a doctor who gives you the sense it's not, get another doctor. There are a ton of choices. I don't ever understand how patients will tell me, well, I don't like to see that doctor because they always tell me I'm too fat and I didn't lose enough weight. And they're afraid of their doctor. And that's the most important intimate relationship to have, but you need to have someone you trust. To me, the ultimate honor I can get from patients is a referral. that to me is the ultimate. Not a referral that they saw the website or they kind of looked at their insurance plan, saw what doctor said. Oh, Kathy, she sent me to you since she told me I'll love you. That to me tells me we're doing the right thing. And our practice is centered on patient care and customer service care. But as a doctor, I can only be as good as my staff. And that's important too. Leverage your doctor's office staff. Do they answer the phone when you call? Do they call you back? If there is an issue, does it get handled correctly? Those things all matter. I see about 2 or 3 new patients a day over the last 2 months of changes from different cardiology practices, solely because they went on, looked at reviews, they called the office and got a human being. A lot of things that's a low bar for success, but it's the reality today. And patients have a choice. Do not feel beholden to a doctor if you don't feel like you can tell them anything and they're in your corner. And if they ever give you the feeling that you're bothering them, you're paying me to help you. I should be happier in my office, not you bowing down to me. That misconception, and that has to go. And it's slow to move, but it's moving.
Well, this has been an absolute treat meeting you and learning all about cardiovascular health and also just how to approach your doctor, because I feel like a lot of people don't know these things. And I would love to say I could come in for a test, but I hope I don't see you too soon. No offense, right?
No,
hopefully my heart will stay nice and healthy. So let's just talk a little bit. You are bilingual, and I find that to be quite important. Talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to give some information about Village Heart and Vein Center.
I'll tell you, bilingual is kind of embarrassing because growing up, I didn't speak Spanish. My parents didn't speak it to me and my brother and sister often.
Oh, were they the parents that said,
No, they just didn't do that. So you just take, you just kind of take the cue from them. That was a mistake that, unfortunately, I haven't done the best job of stopping that with my kids. So when I moved to Florida, I never thought I'd move to Florida. I was finishing at Penn State. Northeast people tend to be snobby about medicine in the South. No one goes to Florida. But I fell in love with the practice out of my fellowship in Orlando. But you have a name, Joel Garcia. You better learn Spanish. So I had this book.
So you had to learn it?
I had to learn it, yes.
Awesome and hilarious.
It's embarrassing, but I learned. You can tell a native speaker can catch me things, but I've definitely I can read, write, but certainly, help a patient. That's been very, very helpful in my career. That's so hard when a patient doesn't speak the language and there's that barrier. They can't tell you, and there's so much loss in the translation.
Scared. Yeah. Well, it has been a treat. Let's talk a little bit about Village Heart and Vein Center. You have locations in Lady Lake and a satellite office in Leesburg. You're accepting new patients,
Absolutely.
I hear. Fantastic. And there's same-day access for existing patients.
Absolutely.
Is there anything you'd like to say? Anything else you'd like to say?
We have a practice that we have 3 partner physicians. Dr. George Couturier has been in the business for a long while, excellent reputation. Dr. Chris Jones, our electrophysiologist, very talented individual. Myself, I have 18 years of practice with subspecialties in heart failure. Then we have associate physicians, Dr. Tampere is a vascular specialist, and Dr. Rusi is an interventional cardiologist. And we have a number of advanced practice providers. So, you're going to get the whole gamut of care in our practice, and we're very patient-centered. Our manager, Lauren McElroy, handles disputes, gets things correct. Patients are very happy with their coming, and if there's an issue, we fix it. We have no problem saying, "Oh, mea culpa, we made a mistake," and that's the kind of practice that right now is paying such dividends for new patient appointments, and that I really want to emphasize is our kind of community home-like feeling in our practice. I'm only as good as my front desk person, and if they're rude, they're having a bad day, that reflects on me. So I'm treating them the best. I'm making sure everyone is treated the same, because that reflects on, what we're presenting to the community. So patients, when they're picking a practice, look at all those factors, not just where the doctor went to school.
Dr. Garcia, can you just give us a few final points about the importance of the visit and how the patient can prepare and leverage that visit?
Well, we talked about preparing in terms of coming in with a list of questions, your medications, your history, and then, being very forthright with lifestyle and how much you do drink and what you do. I can only help you if you're telling me the truth, and I'm never going to shame you or judge you. One thing I want to point out is when you go to see a doctor, everything that's said and done about you by Florida law, you're entitled to. Do not trust other doctors. Just keep your records. Whenever a patient comes to see me, I give them a copy of everything I said and did about them and give them a copy of the results. And I explain to them in language they can understand what the results mean. I had a patient once, and this is why I want to bring this up. Talk to your doctor to get debriefing. Just because that a test is normal doesn't mean sometimes tests are wrong. And that's why I don't treat a test, I treat a patient. And you need that follow-up. I had a patient who didn't want to pay for a copay once, and he saw his results in the portal, and he went and got a bypass surgery in Mayo that he didn't need because he went on Google MD to see what my report meant.
Oh, wow.
He comes to see me 6 weeks later in a nervous breakdown. His wife insisted him because he thought he needed bypass surgery because he wanted to save a few dollars on a copay. All the more reason when you go back for a follow-up with your physician after testing, get the copies and have them explain them to you what they mean. It's very important to kind of close out the visit and to have kind of a final wrap-up of your case and symptoms, because again, tests are infallible. So we want, me to have that doctor-patient relationship where even the test was normal and I'm still having symptoms. Well, it's time for me to look at other things.
And Dr. Garcia, what screening tests do you offer at Village Heart and Vein Center?
So we have comprehensive testing at our Village Heart and Vein Center. We have, stress tests, which will look at blood flow and exercise capacity, often are hallmarks of testing. Echocardiography, which looks at the heart function and valvular disease. We have carotid ultrasound, venous and leg ultrasounds, and then, of course, arrhythmia testing with monitoring. And we have close relationships with imaging centers to provide that cardiac CT scan I talked to you about earlier. So we had the full gamut of testing, including PET cardiac imaging, which is the best testing modality we do offer. It offers less radiation and better pictures to reduce false positive or negative tests. So we have the full gamut of cardiac imaging and testing at our office.
So I've never, ever, ever had a test before, and I'm pushing the 6-0. Do you think it's probably a good idea for me to come in and check myself out?
I do. At the very least, what I'd say, Gina, is getting blood chemistries, lipid profile, cholesterol, sugar, kidney function. That can be easily done with low cost testing. And then at the very least, a 12 lead EKG. And then probably a cardiac, if you have no risk factors, a cardiac CT scan looking for plaque burden you didn't know about. At the very least, that in itself is looking at a lot of potential problems that weren't seen because you're potentially asymptomatic that we can catch and take care of now rather than 15 years from now or 10 years from now when it's a crisis. Additionally, testing allows us to get a baseline evaluation of your heart, and God forbid something happens down the line. We know what it was like at 60 versus 68. That conversation with your cardiologist and your provider, we can go over with you and explain what's more important than not and what is the best option for you. Every patient is different, so I don't have a boilerplate template. It's every patient, what they bring to me is every patient tells a story and everyone is unique. That's the kind of care you'll get at Village Heart and Vein.
And you can find Dr. Garcia and company at villageheartandvein.com. It's a really great website, by the way. I've been there, and maybe I'll go in for a screening. Who knows? That's it once again for the Healthy Living Podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.